Preface. When a man holds up a book and says, "You must believe this because it says, Thus saith the Lord," should we not pity that man? Does he comprehend the liberty of man to acquire knowledge? Any book that imparts knowledge of the life and destiny of man is a good book. Any book that unfolds the character and person of Jehovah and the wonder and glory of his creations is a good book. When a book gives us information of things we know not of, it should also give us a method of proving that information to be true. This book covers that ground. The day has arrived when man will not accept proclamations and assertions. He wants plausible reasons or facts or substantial proofs that the authority be not merely a presence, but a demonstrable fact. The time of man worship is at an end. Readers no longer accept a book as good and great, merely because any certain one wrote it. The book must have merits of its own. Otherwise, it will soon pass out of existence. When a man says, "I heard the voice of Jehovah," saying that part of his speech is worthless. When he says, "I heard the voice of Jehovah saying, do unto others as you would that they should do unto you," then the words become valuable. His assertion of his authority is of no avail in this age of the world. The words purporting to be Jehovah's should, therefore, be the only consideration as to merit. And all men have a right to pass judgment thereon. Is it not the light of Jehovah within all men that makes them conscious of wisdom and truth? If so, then man's expression of any truth or wisdom is Jehovah's expression. If a book were to fall down from the sky with Jehovah's signature to it, man would not accept the book on that account. Why then should anything be said about how this book was written? It blows nobody's horn, it makes no leader, it is not a destroyer of old systems or religions. It reveals a new one, adapted to this age. New York, 1882. Wing Anderson's Preface to OAHSPE. Origin of OAHSPE with hints to the reader. OAHSPE is the most astonishing book in the English language. OAHSPE means sky, earth, and spirit, and is the title to a new Bible given to the world in the year 1881. Although this book is over half a century old, has had 2 editions and many printings in the US, 3 editions and many printings in England, it is little known by the Bible reading public. Strange as the book itself is the account of its birth. A graduate in both medicine and dentistry, Dr. John B. Newbrough was also gifted with astonishing extrasensory perception. For many years, his hobby was psychic research. Many of the foremost mediums of half a century ago were guests in his home and were put through their paces in the efforts of Dr. Newbrough to determine the truth or falsity of spirit phenomena. After several years playing around with various mediums, the good doctor became disgusted with the vacuity of the things they told him while under spirit influence. Convinced that he was contacting out-of-the-body intelligence, he was also disgusted with the low grade of intelligence displayed by them. A sincere seeker after spiritual light, Dr. Newbrough was impressed with the thought that he should become pure himself if he would attract the attention of the type of spirit intelligence he sought to commune with. The years between 1871 and 1881 were spent in spiritual purification, during which time he became aware of spiritual guidance. Instructed to purchase a typewriter and type but must not read what he was writing until it was completed, at the end of a year when the manuscript was completed, he was instructed to read and publish the book titled OAHSPE, a New Bible. OAHSPE purports to have been written at the command of God, who states that he is not the creator but is simply chief executive officer, similar to our president of the US, for our planet Earth. He explains who the creator is and also makes clear the difference between Lord God, God, and Creator. This strange book informs us that the world entered a new era in the year 1848, how the new era is different from those which preceded it, and what changes will come to humanity within the next few years. Dr. George Lawton of Columbia University recently made a study to discover the most important questions to youngsters from 14 to 18. My guess is this study was a while back. Moving on. Their questions arranged in order of frequency: why are we born? What use is life? What makes people unkind, selfish, etc.? What is platonic love, true love? Is there a God? Is there such thing as reincarnation? What happens to us or our souls after we die? Why should there be wars, and why do people go to war? Why does a new scene seem to have happened before? What makes the world rotate, and why don't we feel it? Why must man worship something? Not only is every question in their list answered in this book, which can justly be termed the miracle of a century, but answers will also be found to every spiritual, intellectual, and economic question man is capable of asking. OAHSPE has made up 36 books covering the history of the planet, the history of the human race, the history of every major religion, past, present, and analysis of today and prophecy for tomorrow. Christian people have been praying for centuries, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," without knowing what God's will is, either or in heaven, or what his kingdom is like. OAHSPE gives a full and complete description of many of the heavens of the earth, with a picture of God's kingdom in the statement of when and how this kingdom will come to the earth. In some form, directly or implied, the kingdom of heaven, the millennium, the fifth monarchy, the theocratic commune, the social commonwealth, or whatever you wish to call it, is an essential feature of every Bible in existence. In no other book or Bible will so clear a picture be found of the golden days of peace and plenty to be inherited by our children as will be found in OAHSPE. One of the strangest books in this strange volume is one titled Cosmogony and Prophecy. This book tells what light, heat, electricity, gravity, etc. are, what causes them, what holds planets in their places, gives the many cycles of time used by the ancients in their table of prophecy, tells of relativity, curvature of space, the lens effect of a planet's atmosphere, and other recent discoveries of our astrophysicists. Another book of the 36 books contained in OAHSPE gives the keys to ancient languages and many of the rituals used in ancient secret orders. A book titled Discipline gives a method of developing spiritual powers, prophetic abilities, and extrasensory perceptions. Almost a century ahead of its time came this book, OAHSPE. In the educational field, we find that recent discoveries in education and psychology were all foretold, and a method of child training was given which all progressive educators are endeavoring to put into practice. Strange indeed would it have been if God had not given humanity an answer to the countless questions born of these perilous times. After a study of OAHSPE, to watch the present world's wide transfiguration scene is like seeing a play, the theme, treatment, and conclusion of which is familiar. The object of OAHSPE is not to supplant the former Bibles, nor Vedas, nor other sacred books, nor is OAHSPE a revision or compilation of any of them, but it is a new Bible. It is rather a Bible comprising the causes of all other Bibles, with revelations of the heavens also. Other Bibles have been for a tribe or race of people only. This one is for all the races and people on the earth, showing how the former sacred books were parts of one stupendous plan of our Father for bestowing light upon mortals. Through OAHSPE, we learn why the Chinese became Confucians, why the Hindus became Brahmins, and the Buddhists, and why the Western migratory people became Jews and Christians. In OAHSPE, we find the necessity for this revelation, which provides for the fellowship of all people. It is only the only Bible that reveals the affairs of the angels of heaven, what they do, how they live and travel, and the parts that many of them play with mortals. In fact, it reveals to us a heaven worth living for. The reading of OAHSPE is an undertaking worthy of the most assiduous care. It is not a book for the casual, superficial reader, but for the earnest, persistent seeker of light. And I just have to say, it took me initially about a year to read this book and to consume it properly. If anyone says this book can be read in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's not happening. Your brain would explode. Moving on. The reading of OAHSPE is an undertaking worthy of the most assiduous care. It is not a book for the casual, superficial reader, but for the earnest, persistent seeker of light. With humble but firm assurance, the following is offered as a correct method of study. Begin at the first page and read chapter by chapter. The 3 books titled Cosmogony and Prophecy, Sephath, and Bond's Book of Praise may be omitted at the first reading of OAHSPE and reserved for later assimilation. Do not skip around in OAHSPE in an effort to secure a general idea of the contents. When this is attempted, a state of confusion results which is detrimental to a true understanding of the contents. Again, I have to say, when I first read this, there's a part that talks about Zarathustra, and I was so blown away and confused that had I not continued, it would have certainly altered my understanding of what the book was trying to say. So really buckle down, read it. If it takes you a year, it takes you a year. If it takes you 6 months, it takes you 6 months. It's going to take you some time to read chapter by chapter and to be able to, assimilate it. Moving on. OAHSPE is a book of spiritual light and truth. It is also a historical record. It is presented in such form that each chapter is dependent for part of its meaning on chapters preceding. Failure to follow this vital narrative in its given sequence leads to grave misunderstanding of the text. Again, I will certainly agree with that, having read this book. Where the books are superimposed, read the topmost one entirely through, and then the lower one immediately afterward. Again, reading this book, it gets to a part where there's an upper book and a lower book. I actually read the lower book first because I knew I was going to reread this book, and for whatever reason, my spirit told me to get an earthly understanding of it first before I move to more spiritual or heavenly matters. I am rereading this book as I'm reading it with all of you, and we are going to read the top book first. Had I known that, I would have read the top book first, but moving on. Upper books pertain to heavenly history, lower books contain contemporaneous earth history. OAHSPE is pronounced O as in o'clock, Fa as in father, and Spe as in speak. On 100 fields of eager research science is making, or about to make, discoveries that proclaim OAHSPE as the ultimate book of perfected science. The Banner of Light Letter. John Newbrough's letter, dated January 21st, 1883, to the Banner of Light, a popular spiritualist weekly periodical of the day. To the editor of the Banner of Light, Boston, Mass. Dear Sir, in compliance with your request that I furnish for publication a brief article in regard to the writing of OAHSPE, the New Bible, I cheerfully proceed to do so. You have observed, no doubt, that in OAHSPE no mention is made of the manner in which the book was written, nor by whom. Well, was it not plain to anybody acquainted with such matters that any statement on my part would not be believed by persons unacquainted with spiritual manifestations? And had I said that myself wrote it, my own acquaintances would have known better. Had I said that angels wrote it through my hands, then I would have been denounced as a pretender. Again, if a book have merit, what matters to who wrote it? And if it have no merit, then certainly it does not matter whence it came. The time has been when the name of the author clothed his product with some sort of authority. I rejoice that that day is past, that man worship is at an end, and that all books, including Bibles, are perused not as authorities, but as pastimes to lead us nearer and nearer to the everlasting light. And if a man turn out a good book, I accord him little more credit than I would a ripe apple for being on the sunny side of the tree. But I rejoice most of all because our Heavenly Father, through His angels cooperating with our forefathers, provided us a government that protects us in publishing our highest conceptions, regardless of creeds or dogmas. Why? Today, we have Protestant preachers in their pulpits denying the inspiration of the Old Testament and New Testaments, and only in the slightest possible degree less than Thomas Paine. They begin to judge so-called sacred books according to what they are and not by a supposed authority. This is progress, undoubtedly. On reflecting on these things, it was concluded to publish the first edition of OAHSPE without any reference to its authorship. No attempt has been made to conceal the method in which it was written, but most of the particulars have been told from time to time to inquiring friends. Briefly, then, OAHSPE was mechanically written through my hands by some other intelligence than my own. Many spiritualists are acquainted with this automatic movement of the hands, independent of one's volition. There are thousands and thousands of persons who have this quality. It can also be educated, or rather, the susceptibility to external power can be increased. In my case, I discovered many years ago in sitting in circles to obtain spiritual manifestations that my hands could not lie on the table without flying off into these tantrums. Often they would write messages left or right, backward or forward, nor could I control them in any other way than by withdrawing from the table. Sometimes the power thus baffled would attack my tongue or my eyes or my ears, and I talked and saw and heard differently from my normal state. Then I went in earnest to investigate spiritualism, and I investigated over 200 mediums, traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles for this purpose. Often I took them to my own house and experimented with them to my heart's content. I found that nearly all of them were subject to this involuntary movement of the hands or to entrancement. They told me it was angels controlling them. In course of time, about 10 or 15 years, I began to believe in spiritualism, but I was not satisfied with the communications. I was craving for the light of heaven. I did not desire communications from friends or relatives, or information about earthly things. I wished to learn something about the spirit world, what the angels did, how they traveled, and the general plan of the universe. So after a while, I took it into my head that wise and exalted angels would commune better with us if we purified ourselves physically and spiritually. Then I gave up eating flesh and fish, milk and butter, and took to rising before day, bathing twice a day, and occupying a small room alone, where I sat every morning half an hour before sunrise, recounting daily to my Creator my shortcomings and governing myself in thought and deed. In 6 years' training, I reduced myself from 250 pounds down to 180. My rheumatism was all gone, and I had no more headaches. I became limber and sprightly. A new lease of life came to me. Then a new condition of control came upon my hands. Instead of the angels holding my hands as formerly, they held their hands over my head, and they were clothed with sufficient materiality for me to see them. And a light fell upon my hands as they lay on the table. In the meantime, I had attained to hear audible angel voices near me. I was directed to get a typewriter, which writes by keys like a piano. This I did, and I applied myself industriously to learn it, but with only indifferent success. For 2 years more, the angels propounded to me questions relative to heaven and earth, which no mortal could answer very intelligently. I always look back on those 2 years as an enigma. Perhaps it was to show me that man is but an ignoramus at best. Perhaps I was waiting for constitutional growth to be good. Well, one morning, the light struck both my hands on the back, and they went for the typewriter. For some 15 minutes, very vigorously. I was told not to read what was printed, and I had worked myself into such a religious fear of losing this new power that I obeyed reverently. The next morning, along before sunrise, the same power came and wrote, or printed rather, again. Again, I laid the matter away very religiously, saying little about it to anybody. One morning, I seemed accidental to me, looked out of the window and beheld the line of light that rested on my hands extending heavenward like a telegraph wire towards the sky. Over my head were 3 pairs of hands, fully materialized. Behind me stood another angel, with her hands on my shoulders. My looking did not disturb the scene. My hands kept right on printing. For 50 weeks, beginning spring 1880, this continued every morning half an hour or so before sunrise. And then it ceased, and I was told to read and publish the book OAHSPE. The peculiar drawings in OAHSPE were made with pencil in the same way. A few of the drawings I was told to copy from other books such as Saturn, the Egyptian ceremonies, etc. Now during all the while I have pursued my vocation, dentistry, nor has this matter nor my diet, vegetables, fruit, and farinaceous food, detracted any from my health or strength, although I have continued this discipline for upwards of 10 or more years. I am firmly convinced that there are numberless persons who might attain to marvelous development if they would thus train themselves. A strict integrity to one's highest light is essential to development. Self-abnegation and purity should be the motto and discipline of everyone capable of angel communion. With this in their practice, we might have enough Bibles in a little while to deluge the religious world. But since talking of oneself is the greatest damage one can do to his own mediumship, I thus close. Yours truly, J. B. Newbrough.